couple of stories in the news yesterday that presented contrasting faces of Islam. The first of these is a continuation of the familiar stereotype. Muammar Gaddafi has called for a jihad, a holy war against Switzerland. At the root of this is supposedly the recent vote in Switzerland in favour of banning the building of minarets, although it might also be related to the fact that Gaddafi's son was arrested in Switzerland a couple of years ago, and he's still got the hump with them. Links up in the sidebar. In this, we hear the usual aggressive rhetoric about Israel, infidels and apostasy. The usual threats towards anyone who is perceived as being an enemy of Islam. An enemy of Islam being, of course, anyone who doesn't embrace it wholeheartedly and accede to whatever demands are made by those claiming to speak for Islam. Like as not, we'll see TV footage of people burning Swiss flags and stamping on cuckoo clocks and so on. And of course the Islamophobes here in Europe will leap on this as yet another example of how you can't negotiate with Islam. How multiculturalism doesn't work when you have a group of psychotic fanatics who won't give an inch and are hell-bent on your destruction. Gaddafi is careful to make it clear to we infidels that this call to arms is not terrorism like Al-Qaeda. This is a jihad, which is described as being a right to armed struggle, as if that's going to make any difference to the people who will doubtlessly be murdered as a result of this insanity. The second story is one from the Evening Standard and The Guardian. Links for those also up in the sidebar. Next week, in London, a leading Muslim scholar plans to issue a fatwa against suicide bombings perpetrated in the name of Islam. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in the aftermath of this. For too long, Muslims in Europe have been criticised for their silence in condemning terrorist atrocities that are committed in the name of Islam. Yes, we get the vague noises about how Islam is a religion of peace, as their protesters adequately demonstrate quite a lot of the time. But there's always a sneaky get-out clause in there in which they're very careful to condemn not the acts of violence and slaughter in themselves, but the slaughter of innocents. Innocence being a weaselly subjective term that can include or exclude whomever you wish. And there are radical Muslims out there who consider the label of innocent inapplicable to anyone who isn't as devout as they in their particular brand of Islam. And this isn't Muslim bashing on my part. Take a look at Fred Phelps or Stephen Green or any of the high-profile right-wing Christian fundy-fucks on Fox TV or YouTube, and you'll see that Islam doesn't have the monopoly on bigoted psychopaths. But here, for the first time, it looks like we have the prospect of a statement that is going to be unambiguous in its condemnation of violence. One that dismisses any attempts to use affronts to Islam or grievances as justification. And what's significant is that the particular Muslim scholar making this proclamation, Dr. Tahir ul-Qadri, is prominent in his field. People will take note of what he says, even if they disagree with him. And undoubtedly they will, and there will be a flood of other Islamic scholars refuting what he says. But for the first time, we're seeing a high-profile Muslim scholar make an emphatic statement condemning all violence enacted in the name of Islam. Now, of course, this isn't going to wipe out Islamist extremism overnight, but it's a step in the right direction. If nothing else, Dr. al-Qadri has bravely taken this first step, where others have been reluctant to tread, probably intimidated by the potentially dire consequences. What's likely is that now that the first move has been made, others will follow. We could be witnessing the start of something revolutionary. On both sides there'll be discussion where people start asking difficult questions about the morality of slaughtering people in the name of their religion. Some people discussing whether it's acceptable to behave this way. And people less afraid to speak out and condemn atrocities. And there can be no doubt that that has to be a change for the better.